Now, onto this other point about the now knowing through DNA evidence that we come from West Africa. Well, look, I don't know about Skippy D, but Du Bois done told us a long time where we came from. Dude, that's old news. Where you been? Oh yeah, that's right, that's right. Skippy D has a shoulder shell. So, you know, that's where the DNA part, you gotta plug your stuff. Now let's go on to this part about the Middle Passage being two-way. Two-way trip. The Middle Passage was the boat ride. The love boat. No, the boat ride where you were a part of the property in the hold to be sold at the end point. If you were not in the hold to be sold, then the Middle Passage was not you. The master only conducts it. It's not a two-way trip just because a very few people went back to Sierra Leone, Liberia. That doesn't constitute, this wasn't some kind of vacation, some kind of let's just tour the world trip. No, dude. How do you get to that? That makes no sense whatsoever. How do you even write that's a two-way trip? And most of those elites that were sent overseas, it's because the rulers were trying to get access to European knowledge, doctors, medicine, shipbuilding tactics to bring back. The vast majority never made it back with any useful information. In the case of the Congo, because you mentioned a person from the Congo. Well, Skippy D mentioned a person from the Congo. Half of the people they sent, poof, up and disappeared. Who knows what happened to them? I have a good idea what happened to them, but they poof, up and disappeared. The one fellow who managed to make it to Rome and become a bishop came back to his country and had nothing to do. Just up and died. That's a fruitful trip, ain't it? Speaking of the Congo, we gotta discuss Queen Nzinga. First of all, the person who preceded her, King Afonso, Gwene Congo, got to the point after he repeatedly kept begging the Portuguese for money, priests, teachers, medicine, declared that his land would be slavery free. And basically, the Portuguese kept arming his neighbors. So even if he wanted to stop trading slaves, it wasn't going to happen. Now back to Nzinga. Nzinga gets on the throne. Well, before she gets on the throne, she's in Rwanda as the ambassadress for the Gwene Congo. And she had this little habit of harboring escaped slaves. Who knew? When she became queen, she declared that all her territory would be slavery-free zones, which extended to Matamba, because unlike what you mentioned, Skippy D, there are two areas to which she was ruling by marriage, and her alliance with another group which fell apart due to treachery. But anyway, the fact is, she did her best to keep slavery from happening in her kingdom. Her alliance with the Dutch, which she had to sell some people to, those people were the ones who were trying to kill her and take over her country to enslave her people. So it was kind of a poetic justice for some of them. Unfortunate, but happened. But let's not sully the name of Queen Nzinga over a mistake that she made when she was trying to defend her country to make it slavery free. It's not going to do that. Shame on you, Skippy D. And we should note that even though she had converted to Christianity, like King Alfonso, she was very, very disappointed in the practices of the priests and the Christian Portuguese and their behavior. Now, having said all of this, we have to point out that none of it is relevant. Absolutely irrelevant to the American reparations movement. Why? Because the American reparations movement is not about who in Africa enslaved who. It's not about the complex business arrangement. It's not a blame game. Let me tell you what it is. Our friend Randall Robinson writes in the depth. And this is only one book that discusses what reparations is about. But he points out, page 201, that this is to discuss slavery and the subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination against African Americans. Boris Bittiger, a Yale Law School professor who wrote in his book, The Case for Black Reparations, he made the argument that slavery, that's chattel slavery in America, Jim Crow, and the general climate of race-based discrimination in America had combined to do grievous social and economic injury to African Americans. He further argued that sustained government-sponsored violations had rendered distinctions between de jure and de facto segregation meaningless for all practical purposes. So in other words, our issues with African involvement in the slave trade have nothing to do with the systematic discrimination and oppression of African people in America. So bringing up all this stuff about what Nzinga may have done, with some small numbers of African monarchies that made a whole bunch of money over the slave trade, which is really false when really analyzed, is irrelevant to the conversation. How dare Skippy D try to distract people with all this nonsense information that has nothing to do with the topic? That's just stupid. I'm Mr. Tunji. This has been Garvey's Ghost TV, the Slavery Edition. Ting and ting and ting.